Okay, well, I'm just so thankful to have everyone on board here tonight. This is the subject we're going to talk about is what the title says: some pillars of our faith. We're going to go back in the time right following Christ. I'm so pleased to see the results of this entire program. This is a new program. We've gone through it 1 month now, and I mean, we've been averaging well over 20 people on each session. Last week we had I think we had 40, and that's more than we get in our classes. And we hope it'll continue to grow. You need to become disciples. You're disciples while you're on the Zoom, but then from here you go out and become apostles, and try and explain to people what they're missing and have them come on board. Each one of us, the fathers and I, we each take a different subject, and I stick with my history. And if we run into a fifth week, which we will, I think in July, we'll have a fifth week session. We'll bring in a guest speaker, somebody special to speak on a separate subject. So let's see if we can't keep this thing going and let it grow, because this could be year round. We could do this all the time. It is being recorded, and it will go live, or will be, you'll be able to download it at some point. We're still not sure exactly when. We're trying to work those details out. But every session so far has been recorded. In planning this one tonight, I wanted to take the time following Christ, the Christ resurrection. I wanted to go from there and take it, a couple centuries up to, actually we're going to go up to 313 AD, maybe 325 AD. And I tried to look at it and say, well, I've got 1 hour. Who are the pillars of the faith? Several people, anybody looking at this can sit down and pick their own pillars. Helen at our dinner table was coming up with trying to guess who I was going to talk about tonight, and she zeroed in on a couple. But the point is that there aren't just 3 pillars. We're going to talk about 3 tonight. All right, actually 5, but they're in 3 groups. There's more people that you could put in this classification. But what I'm looking at are, from my standpoint, those who we could not have done without. Okay. If without them, would we have the faith that we have today? Now, it's God's faith, so I'm sure he would have, if we didn't have them, he'd find someone else to do it. But these are 3 special situations, all right? And those are the ones that I'm going to concentrate on and focus on tonight, okay? You may be able to figure out who some of these are, but I'm not going to let you pay much attention. We'll go right to the first one. This is the obvious one. And if you can't have, this church couldn't have gotten started, without Peter and Paul. And actually, they represent the apostles. I could have put all the apostles, but it was Peter and Paul that really did, great items, very significant. They led the way in many cases. They were the first in many cases of things that they were going to do. And we're going to cover some of those with you tonight. Now, we're going to start with Peter. Because everybody knows Peter. You probably have some good background on him already. He was the first to witness of the apostles. He was the first to witness the risen Christ. Mary Magdalene was the first person to witness the risen Christ. And I've read some things lately from some of our elder saints that said actually the Mother of God, Mary, probably saw Christ first. He would have gone to his mother, okay? But we don't have any record of that. We assume that that's what it is. But as far as the apostles themselves, the guys that were first 12 disciples, we lost Judas, and he was replaced with Matthias at this point. Of all those people, Peter was recognized as the first of them, as the leader, and he was the first one to see the risen Christ. He was the first to teach and the first to preach. He converted in one day, and it's right at one of the first things in the book of Acts. He was the first to baptize and convert 3,000 people in 1 hour in one day. That was kind of a major step going forward. He was the first bishop of Rome. He was the first bishop of Antioch. Now, that's something that needs a little more explanation. At the time following Christ, there were 4 areas that started to gather that became centers. Okay, obviously, one would be Jerusalem. Everything was happening in Jerusalem. So all the apostles were in Jerusalem. Another one would obviously be Rome, because that's the area that ruled the world. The third one is another obvious one for that time period, and that was Alexandria. All right, Alexandria is in Egypt, and it has one of the 7 wonders of the world there. But it also has somebody's microphone is on, and it has, like I said, a great library. So it was a very distinguished place of learning. All right, so it attracted a lot of people. The other place was Antioch, and most people don't study Antioch. You don't hear Antioch too often, but it was very, very dominant in the beginning part of the development of the church. You can make a case to say the 4 pillars of the church at that time were Rome, Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem. Antioch is where the word Christianity came from. They were the first to use the term. And the fact that Peter goes to Antioch, and this is all covered in the book of Acts. Everything I've said to you so far is in the book of Acts, including the baptism of 3,000 people. So there's a great deal in, we don't have time to go through all those things in there. Please, one of the things, let me stick in here, I wanted to start with it so we all understand. Our mission, our goal on the ministry of this, of our church here, the educational ministry, is to establish a concept in our community of continuous education. What we mean by that is that in this presentation I give you today, if you don't leave with something from it, if you don't leave in this history class now with a little more understanding of history, if you don't leave father's classes with a little more understanding of the spiritual nature of what he's saying, if you don't take something out of it, then we've failed. Because what we want you to do is take what we talk about, and embellish it and learn it. So go out and study. Go to the bookstores or on Amazon and pull in some the material and learn more about what we're talking about. So that's why that is our goal, and that's what we hope to accomplish in all of this. So we're going to, you'll hear me refer at the end of the presentation. I'll give you some at least one book I have here that I would suggest to you to read. I will always suggest a book for you to read. So going back here now with the bishop as far as Rome and Antioch, like I say, this is all covered in the book of Acts. But you will not find much information about Peter going to Rome. We read Peter goes to Rome when he's in prison. We read Peter is in Rome when he's executed, when he's martyred. But we don't see him teaching as much in Rome. There are other writings. There's another series of writings called the Apocryphal Accounts, which there are many of those, but in the 4th century, the church itself had a council that met, and they decided on which of all the writings were valid. They could authenticate it. They had to authenticate it back to Christ. That was the main thing they had to do. So as long as they could authenticate it back to Christ, it became, they listed it as a gospel. And so that's when the 4 were selected. But there were other writings, many of them, and we call those the Apocrypha, that are outside of the acceptance. All right, the authenticity couldn't be proven. And as a matter of fact, there was a lot of plagiarism. There was a lot of heresies at that time. And so the fathers who put the Bible together back then, narrowed it down to what we have today. And so that was all done back in the 4th century. So there's not much in any of these areas that talk about Peter, going to Rome. However, the Catholic Church, feels strongly that there are some areas there, and that's why he is the Pope, or the first bishop, the first Pope of Rome. But if with the four areas of Alexandria and Jerusalem, throwing those two in, Peter is the main man. He's the patriarch of both of them, or half of them, of Rome and Antioch. Pope is just father, means Holy Father, as a patriarch, as a Holy Father. So it's the same word. So, our word is patriarch, and the Roman Catholic word is Rome. At this point of history, there is no Roman Catholic Church and there's no Orthodox Church. It's only the Christian Church, as I mentioned, coined by the people from Antioch. Okay, but Peter did a lot of things other than that. But so far, just those things alone make him a significant pillar. Just if you think about those things that he established, the fact that he actually was able to get people converted to the faith. Can you imagine what these saints had to do? It's amazing. It drives me nuts thinking about. But these apostles, these men, fishermen, half of them, nobody that you're talking about like leaders, great leaders of countries, talking about normal people, they put their lives on the line and they went out there to teach the faith, knowing, because Christ told them, that they're not going to be happy with the ending, their ending, that they're all going to suffer terrible endings. They're all going to be martyred. Only one wasn't martyred, and that was John. All the others were martyred, and they would have to stand up for him, and they did. And they went through such terrible, terrible tortures. Peter, as you can see at the bottom, he was crucified on June 29, 67 AD. He was crucified. Well, let's move along here. I've got some pictorial things to show you as we go. But along with Paul, the two of them will become together. All right. Even the icon that I showed you to begin with, you saw both Peter and Paul, and that's. I include both of them in this part. This is as one pillar. They together they led the apostles in establishing 85 canons. All right, the very structure of a church and the regulations. The next line there, the didache means teaching. The word itself. It's a manuscript that it's not very long. I have a copy of it. You can get it on the internet. I'll be glad to give you a copy if you want. It lists certain things, and it's purported to be put together by the apostles. It's not very clear. They can document it back to the 2nd century. All right, so as far as a timetable, they can document it that it goes back to that time era. But there's no mention anything that Peter and Paul and the apostles and all sat around and did this. Okay, but it is called the apostles' teaching of the regulations, sort of. So it's been given credit that it was put together by the apostles, but it has things in there. It's really interesting that we do today, all right, that we still do. The Wednesday, Friday fast is in the Didache. Baptisms, the understanding of baptism, it's in the Didache. So these are all things that Peter was instrumental in putting together. Let's go this way. He actually very early in the book of Acts, you'll read about him raising Tabitha from the dead. Dorcas is also her name. It's in whatever language you're reading it. So, but in our Bibles that we read, we see the name Tabitha. He actually did raise a child, a young woman from the dead, which is sort of shows immediately that he is the one that is taken the part now of the lead. He's taken the examples of Christ and showing people still the strength of the faith of Christ. A lot of people assume that Peter and Paul were crucified, or one was executed and one was crucified on the same day, and that's not true. They were both martyred on June 29th, but they were 1 year apart. So we're talking about Peter now. There's an example of a picture on the right showing his crucifixion. He was nailed to a cross, but he at the time said to everyone that was all these guys that are around there, all the soldiers, he asked if they would crucify him upside down. He said he didn't deserve to be crucified, the way the Lord was. So it had to be worse, And he also wanted to be able to look up in the sky and see and talk with Christ and to talk with God. So he was crucified upside down. Death and crucifixion, death through crucifixion is through suffocation. That's the whole purpose, is that you are out there in the open air where everybody can see you, and you're being humiliated. They put they pour salt on you. They put honey on you so that it attracts birds and insects. It's a torture. It's really a horrible torture. And to do it even upside down, would delay the strangulation, I think. I'm not sure of that, but it was a terrible way to go. And it just amazes me every time I think about these things and what they did for us. How do I want to go over here? Let's move on. It'll pop up a little later. There it is. Paul. Preeminent apostle. Peter and Paul are called the preeminent apostles. They're linked together, as I've said. They each did different things. Paul was the first one really to go out into the different areas, and take the faith out there. Can you imagine what he had to do? He had to go to Greece and convince the Greeks that their god Zeus didn't exist and Apollo didn't exist, and convert them to Christianity. I mean, what a task he had to do. And he was phenomenal. He did a great job in doing this. But we've mentioned some of the things that you see along there that he and Paul did, or Peter did. I mentioned those earlier. But one of we're just going to pick up a couple areas that are interesting about him. The top one is a picture taken at the church in Philippi, where Lydia was baptized by Paul. Paul did a lot with women. He actually had women who were, he made as a deacon. We know that Phoebe was a deacon. He announced it. It's in the book of Acts. So they actually used, in first setting up the church, they actually had women involved in the church. And I've read somewhere that Phoebe actually would help out with baptisms, and would help out with certain things, and because they're trying to establish the church, and Paul felt that women were as good as men in establishing the church, and he was the first really to get into using women in the ministries. Thecla is mentioned in the New Testament. Priscilla, these are all the names that you can read in there. These are women that he would write back to and visit and involve them in things in the church. So the interesting thing about Lydia, though, that's why I have it segmented there. That picture there is the spot that she was baptized. It's right outside the church. It's a beautiful church. You can't see it from there. That is strictly for baptisms. They have the baptismal font is about as big as our entire solea. It's a huge thing. It's almost like a pool, but it's a magnificent place. But it's there because it's a very significant place. Lydia was the first person who converted and baptized outside of the Jerusalem area, officially Europe. She was the first one to be baptized outside the local group, outside the church, the mount, the Holy Mount, and because Paul is in Greece. Paul did an awful lot in Greece. He started out in Corinth, went up all the way to Thessalonica. From Thessalonica, he made his way over to the Mount Athos area, but in going through that area, or Constantinople, not Mount Athos, I'm sorry. He'd go through Philippi, and that's where he would see Lydia. There's not much mentioned about Lydia, but the reason it's so significant is that she was the first conversion in Europe. But what we remember him most for, by the way, you can see down there, he's martyred on June 29th, a year later than Peter. The reason is that they had two different types of executions, first of all. Paul was not executed, was not crucified. And why not? Because he was a Roman citizen. And they saved crucifixion, because it was so severe, they saved it for people who weren't citizens of Rome. So for people like Peter, he was the lucky one. He had to get crucified. Paul was decapitated. Okay, I don't know if that's any better, but it's quicker, I guess, and that's why. But he was on the same day, but not the same date. He was on a year later. But what we remember Paul the most for is, where is it? There it is. The stoning of Stephen. He started out, he was the one that organized the event to actually stone one of the apostles. This is Stephen was one of the additional apostles. There were 3 sets of apostles. There were the original 12. Then there were the 7 inner circle ones, or the ones that would go around help the 12 apostles. And then there was a group of 70. Okay, so the group that we're talking about, Stephen, he was the youngest of them. He was in the group of 7, and he was the first martyr of the church. He was the first one martyred for the faith. And it's at this spot. This spot is right outside right down from the Golden Gate. It's outside of another gate there, and I've forgotten which gate it was, but it's right near the Golden Gate. It's on that side, facing the Garden of Gethsemane. Actually, it's right across the valley there. And this is the spot where he was stoned. And it's this event that changed his name at that time when I was Saul. Paul was now known as Saul in that time. And his name was changed when Christ confronted him as a blinding light and blinded him for several days until a fellow by the name of Ananias was sent to him and cured his blindness. And that's when Saul converted to Paul and became the pillar, a great pillar of our faith. So let's go on to a second one now. That's group 1. All right, now here's one that you may not have thought of. All right, St. James the Righteous, also known as St. James the Just, and there he is right there. There are 3 Jameses mentioned, 2, one very prominent, second one almost prominent, the third one you don't read much about. This is the third one that we're talking about. This is known as St. James the Just. You've heard him referred to as St. James the Just, or St. James the Righteous. This is the one, Iakovos. So whoever has the name day in October, I think the 29th, Iakovos. I have this here just to show you that he is the brother of Christ, stepbrother, of course. Mary had no other children. So is from Joseph's side. He was married previously. He had 4 people, sons, had a daughter. Of the sons, one was James, and one of the other major ones was Jude, and Jude is one of the original 12 disciples. James was not one of the original 12 disciples, although he's always confused as being one. He was not. The picture here, the 2 icons here show, there's James right there. Joseph is behind the insets of my face there, but there's Joseph, and there is James. This is when they went to Egypt at the Christmas story, when they were fleeing Herod. And Herod said he was going to kill all the young children. But there's James there leading the way, and there's the other children of Joseph. Another older icon just showing James back there. So we know that James was the stepbrother of Christ. Very humble man, very, very great example of a great Christian, of a good, solid Christian faith. He loved Christ. Whereas Jude sort of was a little more jealous of Christ in the beginning, and he came around certainly and became very strong in the faith, Jude. But James was always the elder brother to Christ, and Christ would lean on him often for things, and a lot of them we didn't see. But we're going to go over a couple of things that we are aware of, because he was super significant. He's the son of Joseph. Salome was the wife at that time of Joseph. And he was first called the Righteous. I have the Righteous there. You see I changed it, James the Just. That's what he's referred to today. The name Joglion in Arabic or Hebrew. I'm not sure which language it was, but means righteous. And that's why he was referred to as James the Righteous. But he became known as James the Just because he was just. He was just, he did everything. He did everything for the good of people. And as a matter of fact, the very phrase there, for every good and perfect gift is from above. Where have you heard that? You hear that every Sunday when we were in church. That phrase is mentioned, and that's from the book of James. He has an epistle, but he also has a liturgy. He wrote he's actually responsible for the very first liturgy written. We don't use his liturgy. It's still active. It can be used, and I've heard that it has been used occasionally for special events, whatever. But it's not the same as the one that we do today, which was written, in the 4th century by St. John Chrysostom and St. Basil the Great. Now we just came through the one with St. Basil the Great. That's done just a few times of the year. At Easter we do it. On his name day, I believe we do it. And the rest of the year, the main, most of the services are for St. John Chrysostom. And, like I say, he's in the 4th, both of them are in the 4th century. But James, the brother of Christ, writes the first liturgy, okay? He was the first bishop of Jerusalem. Now, look how significant that is. I know I was saying, that Peter got Antioch and he got Rome. But here, the first bishop of Jerusalem, that's where all this happened. That was the center of the place of the world. To this day, when we were visiting the patriarch on our last trip to Jerusalem, the thing he spoke to us about, and he says it every time we meet with him. He says that the patriarch of Jerusalem we're talking about, he said that it's the center of the world. And if you look at the cross from Jerusalem, there's a special cross that they have. It has 5 crosses, and the one in the center represents Jerusalem, and the other 4 represent Alexandria, Antioch, Rome, and Constantinople. So they feel very strongly that everything in the world emanates from the center of Jerusalem. And for the disciples, the apostles, now to pick James outside of their group, he's not one of their 12 now. Is significant. All right, so he's got the spot to be the first one now. He wrote the first liturgy I mentioned, and interesting about it, there is a reference in there to the discovery of the cross. So that's in 320. The cross was discovered in 326 A.D. We're talking about James's writings are in 47, 50, somewhere around there A.D. And that's a significant statement there, because that's identifying that the cross of Christ was found. Discovery of it was Helen, and we'll hear about that a little bit later. And there's one of the apocryphal books that I was talking to you about, the Proto-Evangelion of James, is really, it was very close to being a gospel. It was that close. It's a beautiful thing to read, but like I say, the authenticity of it could not be guaranteed or certified. So, but it has many of the historical facts that we use in our church, the history things that we use in our church. We don't use anything that has to do with the salvation of our souls or for our bodies, but for the church, but for history, the Proto-Evangelion are just history books. But why is he a pillar of orthodoxy? Okay, I think those things alone that I just mentioned makes him a pillar. But here's the big event, and we're going to see our friends again, Peter and Paul. The Council of Jerusalem. Now, this is covered in the book of Acts. This is something that most people, I would say, in our faith are not aware of. There was an issue that Paul and Barnabas were faced with. They were doing a great job going outside, like I said, going to Greece, going to all these areas, trying to convert all these people to Christianity and to follow Christ. And the law of Moses said they had to be circumcised. This bothered Paul and Barnabas because it's kind of difficult. It's not the easiest thing and most comfortable thing to be circumcised. It's kind of painful. And Paul and Barnabas just felt that some of these things had to we're not necessary. We've had Christ here on earth with us. We know his teachings, and these people are willing to accept the teachings. So why do we have to go through circumcision? So what they did is they went to Jerusalem. Why did they go to Jerusalem? Because of James. James the just, James the righteous. They wanted to meet with him and bring this problem to him. Peter happened to be there. Peter was there. Remember now, Peter's the head of Antioch. He's the patriarch of Antioch. And Paul and Barnabas were in Antioch at the time with this issue of circumcision. And when they went and met with James, James had his group of elders, and all of them met together. James, Peter, Paul, Barnabas, and the elders. And as stated in the book of Acts, James comes back and says that the decision that he is making, along with the council, the decision of the council led by James now, is that circumcision was not necessary. Why is this so important? Why is it a foundation or a pillar of our church? Because that is the example that was set. That was the format that was set for the church to be run by councils, not by individuals. This technically was the first council. It wasn't established as an ecumenical council. First one will come a little bit later, but this was the first issue that popped up. They all got together on it. James led the way on that, and it was made an official sanctioned thing that circumcision was not necessary. So for that, we put James as a pillar, along with our friends again, Peter and Paul. And you're going to find Peter and Paul in everywhere, including this next one. This is our third and final one. Constantine the Great and Helen the Great, Constantine and Helen. We've got a lot of people named that in our family and all of your families. Great name day. We just had it recently. It's a great story here about them. And some interesting things that you may not be aware of. Originally, the Roman Empire was run by Diocletian. Diocletian was an extremely evil man, okay? As far as, let's say, a disciplinarian. He wanted no parts of this Christianity. He wanted to, eliminate it as much as he could. He had everybody thrown, into the lion's den, taken to Circus Maximus, most of them. That's where most of the Christians were put. They didn't go to the Roman Colosseum, as a lot of people think. The Roman Colosseum was used for different things, for battles of ships and everything, because they had water in it. But the Circus Maximus, which is right down the street from the Roman Colosseum, that's where they would take the Christians and everything. And Diocletian was just really adamant and made it a special issue for him to eliminate those that followed the Christian faith. And but he started getting old, and he had difficulty running and ruling the Roman Empire. You can imagine how big it was. You know how big it was. And he felt that the best way to handle it maybe is to break up the empire into 4 different areas, 4 tetrarchs. I always have trouble with that word. 4 areas, easier to say it that way. And he appointed for people to rule those areas. He, of course, took one in the east. He was the Augustus, the head man in the east. He gave a section to Galerius, who was his son-in-law, Maximinian, and then Constantius. Those are the 4 areas. So you had the 2 in the east and 2 in the west. So the Roman Empire, for the few remaining years of Diocletian's life, were ruled by 4 emperors. Okay, Constantius would die. Diocletian would die. Actually, Diocletian's the first one to die. Galerius moves into the position of Augustus, and then Maximinian comes over here, and you've got Constantius still over there now in the west as the Augustus, and Licinius is brought into the group. And then Constantius will die. And before his death, he passes the torch over to his son, Constantine. So now you have Galerius, a relative of Diocletian, Maxentius, who's also a relative of Diocletian, Constantine, the son of Constantius, and Licinius, who was a follower, a friend of Constantine's. So those were the four running the entire area. I'm not going to go through the whole concept here or the whole thing because it's a lot of years of history here involved. But what it boils down to is that little by little, Constantine gained power, combined with Licinius and defeated Galerius, and then went after Maxentius. This is one of the big things. So let me go over to, there you go, there's Constantine. This is the big event that we're talking about. Maxentius had the Roman Empire, the center, Rome and everything, and that was the last area that was separate from Constantine. And he was one of those that would have the people, the Christians martyred and thrown into the lions areas for their lunch. So Constantine, through the help of his mother, by that I mean the mother was so religious, she had such an influence on him. So Constantine felt that he had to stop Maxentius. And so he had his troops. He had 1/3 the amount of what Maxentius had. Maxentius had the bigger position as far as this being in Rome with all the soldiers there. Constantine, like I said, had about 1/3 of them. And they came to this bridge that you see there, this river. It's called the Milovan Bridge. And that night, the night before the battle, Constantine had a vision. There's many interpretations of the visions. PBS actually had a documentary on this actual event. But Constantine, as our church accepts, saw a vision in the sky, and he saw a cross. Okay. And underneath it was a banner, and it said, "In this sign, conquer." And that's the little inset that you see at the bottom here. That's what we're showing. And so Constantine now, who's one of the Roman emperors. Okay, so he's his side of the religious life was still involved in other gods and everything. He's not baptized. He's not a baptized Christian yet. His mother is a total follower of Christianity, but he likes what he's learning from his mother about Christianity, and he doesn't like these martyrs that are going on, with being thrown into a den of lions for lunch. So he sees this symbol in the sky, and he takes it and has all the soldiers put it on their shields. Okay, I was talking to Father Steve about it. He was telling me that they actually painted it in red, or not red, but they painted it on the shield themselves. And they went into battle, and the battle was at this bridge here, the bridge of Milovan. And there's the bridge back there, if you can see it. Okay, they built this pontoon to try to get across, and they were able to get across. And Maxentius actually came down this way on the top of this bridge here, and the bridge actually collapsed. All right, during the fighting, the bridge collapsed. Maxentius drowned. Okay. And Constantine's forces actually routed, even though they're at a great disadvantage in numbers. They routed the Roman soldiers, and with the banners and everything showing the symbol of the cross. And this was in 311 AD. So now we have Constantine as the ruler of the Roman Empire. All right. He's going to do several things as a ruler of the Roman Empire. One of the first things he does is issue the Edict of Milan. The Edict of Milan says that, and this was in 313 AD, that you do not have to hide your faith. All faiths will be accepted by the church. A lot of people think that he issued this decree saying that Christianity was the faith of the church of the Roman Empire. That would come later. Okay, that's not what's happening now in 313 AD. What he's saying here is that, hey, all of you in the catacombs hiding in fear and trying to do a service, you can come out of the catacombs now. Okay, you can come out and you can start your churches and you can pray to whoever you want. This is no little thing. This is major stuff. So you're talking about, some really, really major things. I read one historian who said this battle, the Battle of Milvian Bridge, is one of the 5 greatest battles ever. Okay, can you imagine that? One of the 5 greatest battles ever. In other words, of all the battles, this one had such a major influence. It changed the world. Winning that day, brought Christianity, gave Constantine the power to issue the faith, the right for everybody to have a faith. Christianity came out from the catacombs, brought all the things with them that they took into the catacombs, or the icons, the paintings they were doing on the walls of the catacombs, the incense, all these things come out now, and they start to establish churches. And it was because of Constantine the Great. Prior to that battle, only 10% of the Romans were Christian. Okay, and I'm surprised it was as much as 10%, because who would want to announce they're a Christian, because they'd be martyred. But within 100 years following the battle, 90% had become Christian of the Roman Empire. And like I said, it has been considered by many, it's one of the 5 most significant battles in the history of the world. Okay. And now we didn't say anything about Helen. All right. Well, Helen, of course, is always shown carrying a cross because she found the cross. It's really interesting. Let me get to this. I'm starting to run out of time. Let me just get into some of these sites and talk about some of the things she did. Finding the cross is major, okay, because it confirmed the faith to a lot of people. And like I say, it was mentioned in the book of James. So here, though, one of the great things she did was, aside from the cross, is she would build churches. Every theological spot, spiritual spot, every spot that Christ went to, significance spot, that's the word I'm looking for. She would have a church built there. She built a church. This is the one in the Nativity. Okay, this is the Church of the Nativity. This is just to give you a quick look inside. We're not going to go through all this because that's another day. We'll talk about that at Christmas. But back here is behind the iconostasios is where you go down to the cave. The cave is right there under the ground. You can't see this, but this is opening. These are glass windows, so you can see what was down below. So the cave everything is down below. The church is on above. But Helen is the one who built the first covering, the first church, chapel, right here. She built the church at the tomb of Christ. This is the church of the resurrection, the Holy Resurrection. The church. This is where Christ. This was the cave of Joseph of Arimathea, the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. It's been covered, and covering it, they preserved it, and the chapel was originally built by Helena. The Christians enter this way, and this is where we go in to venerate. This is where the holy candles are lit that we light at Easter. This is where the first one is lit, right here. This entrance back here is for the Armenian faith. The other faiths to go from the backside because they can't walk into it. This is their original church. This has the altar and everything. So, the people of other faiths cannot go into our altar. But this is another significant thing. And let me just show you this. I just think this is interesting. This is what it looked like back in the day of Christ. This is the Calvary. He was crucified here. He was put in the tomb here. Okay, this is the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. This is where he was put. Now, the church, going down here to your left, is built, and there's the church on the right too, but let's look on the one on the left. This was taken, let's go back, and put right on top of that. Okay, so here's Calvary. All right, when you go into the church, you have to go up steps to go to this spot. And then the tomb is down, the tomb being what I just showed you earlier. So it's all encased now in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, but it was Helen that built the church right here initially. All right, so let's move on. She built the chapel at St. Catherine's Monastery. This is there's Mount Sinai. In the background there, a burning bush is right around here somewhere and there. And she built the chapel around the burning bush, all right? There's so many other places. The Church of the Ascension, right where Christ ascended in the Mount of Olives. She built a church there. This is a statement from John Julius Norwich, who was a guy that I love his books. I read his 3 studies on on the Byzantine Empire, and I just thought it was interesting. I was reading it last night. I just thought this line was interesting. The first was to adopt. He's speaking about Constantine. The first thing that he did was to adopt Christianity. Second was to transfer the capital of the empire from Rome to the new city. That I will cover with you the next time I see you. The city of Constantinople. Together, these 2 decisions and their consequences have given him a serious claim to be considered accepting only for Christ, Buddha, and the Prophet Muhammad, the most influential man in all of history. That's quite a statement. And one of the interesting things about all this, I don't know if you picked up on it, but they're all tied together. I didn't realize this until I finished and started to review it and go over it. Peter and Paul met with James, went to James and helped with the council. Peter and Paul, oh no, I didn't tell you that one thing. Oh, let's go back. I got a few minutes here yet. We'll go back. I forgot one thing. Let me see, where is it here? There, I forgot to talk about that. Yes, this is interesting because this is where Peter and Paul got involved. A lot of people didn't know this. Constantine had leprosy. He came down with leprosy, and this is during his reign, and he had a vision. He had a vision from, guess who? Saint Peter and Paul. And they said that he should go and visit with this pope, this bishop, whose name was Sylvester. And Sylvester would cure him of leprosy, and that's what happened. And again, the only reason I point this out, it just brings all 3 of them together into the pillars of Orthodoxy, tying them all together. I have a book. I got to put these important notes here so that everybody knows. The illustrations used in this presentation are from public domain of Wikipedia and from personal photos that I've taken. Okay, and there was one photo there that I've got to give credit to it. Yeah, it's all right. I put the credit at the bottom so that we're safe when we go live. But I do have a book that I like a lot that I'm going to recommend. Okay, if you feel ambitious, you can want to read Norwich's 3 books on the Byzantine Empire. Starts from the exact part that I did, the time following Christ, and it goes through all the way up to the split of the church and the conquest, actually, of 1453 of the occupation and conquest of Mehmet the Conqueror. So if you want to read it, it's very easy to read, and I like it a lot. There's a lot of controversy over some of his writings, but it gives you a great background and understanding of the whole thing. And if you don't want to do that, just make sure you attend my next 2 sessions, because I'm going to cover those things anyhow. But this is a good book, The Law of God. I give this to my students, to some students. I give this to people of faith that are converting. But I've gotten a lot out of it, and a lot of the things we talked about today. Now, you can find some writings of that in here. And the other book I would recommend is the book on the Orthodox Church by Timothy Ware, now Bishop Callistos Ware. Almost my entire class that I do for Sunday school, when I was first putting it together, I did with that book. So if those of you have a little extra time now, you want to do some reading, these are all books you can get on Amazon. We have them in the bookstore, but I don't know if you can get them. But you'll get a lot of good information, surprising information.